What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Super Q&A. So we've got about 20 questions to get through this time. I'm going to hopefully do it in one big bunch. If you don't know what this is, earlier in the month, I opened up the floor to people on Patreon. If they wanted to ask me any question they possibly wanted, I would guaranteed give them an answer in a video, and that's what this is. Anybody is welcome to join in on this. There'll be a link in the description if you'd like to try for yourself. The questions will range from all kinds of topics related to games we may have played before, games we might like to play in the future, Guild Wars 2, of course, and whatever else in the real world, I suppose, which we rarely talk about. So moving on, first question is from the Gleeful Grognard, who said, way back in early April actually, he said, is it time for a 2-room run of Grimrock? So last year we played The Legend of Grimrock 2. People loved that series. People really liked the original as well that I played even longer before that now. What actually happens in that game, for those that don't know, if you get like a secret sequence of achievements as you play through, you unlock a special mode of the game. Now, I'm kind of tempted to call it a hard mode because I think it does make it harder than the regular game, but it basically adds like a lot of flavor. You get a very specific character you play through called Two-Room who can move at double the speed and has all these weird cross-class mechanics. It's a fun idea, but I've never played as Two-Room, and I don't know, maybe that would be something we'd do on a stream. I probably won't randomly start coming out with Grimrock 1 videos again, though, I'm afraid. Continuing on, though, Grognard says, have you considered playing Divinity Original Sin Enhanced Edition with Matt in advance of the sequel releasing in the coming future? Possibly with gimmicks or your own metagame where you do something to decide on conversation outcomes outside of the built-in rock, paper, scissors. That is a really cool idea, but unfortunately, last year I played through all of Divinity Original Sin, and I've kind of had my fill of it, so I doubt I'll do videos of it. I did try when the Enhanced Edition released to try again, but the fact I already knew the outcome of a lot of the stories kind of, I don't know, it took some of the magic away, so I'm probably waiting for the sequel more than anything else, and when the sequel comes out, that could be a really good idea. So for people that don't know about this game, it's a top-down RPG that does very well on the co-op side of things. So you might meet an NPC and they say, hey, should I leave this orc around that has apparently fallen in love with my colleague, or should I kill it because at the end of the day it's an orc and it's going to turn? And you get to weigh in, but the way it interacts with cooperative gameplay is I could choose, yeah, you can keep the orc, and my friend who's playing with me could choose, no, how about we kill the orc? And you and the other player like have to reason with one another, and it's got an in-game rock, paper, scissors game, which is, you know, it's rock, paper, scissors. Maybe you could do stuff outside of the game to determine. That would be really cool. It's a nice concept, but I doubt you'll see us playing Divinity Original Sin Enhanced Edition on either of the channels, Visualwood or this one, but the sequel? I don't know. That could be very, very, very interesting. And then you also ask about playing Dark Souls 1 or 3 in a similar way to the way I played through Grimrock. Listen, Dark Souls is the #1 of all-time requests I have had from people who want me to move into other franchises and play other games. Everyone wants to see Wooden Potatoes play Dark Souls, and especially for a while back there with Dark Souls 1, people wanted to see me do lore stuff, but I feel like that is a massively oversaturated area of YouTube now, and it's always one of those weird things when people want me to play a game, but I don't even know if I like the game. I've never spent a second in a Dark Souls game, so I don't know whether I'd like them, so I definitely couldn't promise that I'd do videos on them before I've even tried them out, if that makes sense. But you are not alone in wanting to see some Wooden Potatoes Dark Souls combination action, and I know it's on everyone's minds right now because of the third game, but you're not going to see it, I'm afraid. I feel like I missed the boat, and I wouldn't feel right going into that franchise when I know there are so many other YouTubers so much better at their jobs than I am, who are already in that space. All right, let's move on. Joshua has some questions about Guild Wars 2. He says, this is a bit of a lengthy one, but we'll get through it. He says, as one of the Australian Guild Wars 2 players, I've noticed that our experience of the game and its mechanics are quite different from what you experience. Now, I'm not complaining or anything. If anything, I'm praising Guild Wars because a lot of the game isn't actually affected too much by latency, considering on average we get around 250 to 300 ping. However, a few things get really messy. For example, to Quattle's waves, I need to jump into the wave to dodge it, or Burning Retreat. It's one of the worst examples where a skill will happen and you see the effect, then your character will jump back to where you started and rubber band back to where the skill ends. I know that there's no way to fix the problem, and it honestly doesn't affect the game too much now that they fixed gliding. It's honestly fine. Even with raids, I've managed to beat the first wing with little trouble. Anyways, I wanted to hear your thoughts about it. Does it make the game harder or unfair? Could ArenaNet do something for high ping players so that they can experience the game the way it's meant to be played? Well, it's funny. You say that it's unfixable. In some ways it is fixable, it's just they don't want to go that route. Like, so when you're experiencing these rubber banding, or when you were experiencing the gliding issue, or, you know, another big one, and I'm well aware of this because I have played the game in a laggy environment, stuff like jump pads. One of the biggest times where OCX players weren't having too much fun in Guild Wars was when, say, Dry Top first came out, or when they really started using a lot of these jump pad mechanics, because the lag on those can be horrendous. And there are fixes for this kind of stuff, and even skill-based stuff too. It would just be to let it all run client-side and never verify with the server. So that is a fix, but obviously the problem there is when it comes to people's ability to hack and, you know, fly around the game and do all kinds of stuff. It just makes things easier for people and opens more doors that ArenaNet don't really want open. I do think in general the game's pretty good to play at 300 ping. I have spent a lot of time around 300 ping. Don't forget, I live in EU and I play on NA. That puts me to around 150 ping at all times. And if I'm uploading videos while I play, I'll hit around that level. For me, Guild Wars 2 becomes unbearable around the 500 mark. And if anybody is listening to me right now and plays at 500 ping, I would love to hear your experiences in the comments. Because it's one of those things you don't notice as it gets worse and worse. Actually, for the first 2 years or so of me playing Guild Wars 2, I honestly thought, and I swear to God, I thought that there was no difference, no perceptible difference between playing NA versus EU. I just couldn't detect any. However, since I got the ability to transfer my account for free between NA and EU, and I've spent a lot more time on EU, I have started to pick up on the differences, and I have noticed that the game is slightly more responsive over on EU, and that lag overall does have a role to play. And I'm always the first to blame my death in a raid or, you know, a foolish play in this area or that on ping issues, because you really can feel the difference, I swear to God. Especially stuff with, you mentioned Burning Retreat, which is Elementalist Star Fire 4. If you look at Elementalist Dagger Fire 3, where you rush in, it has an evade frame associated with it, and even the slightest bit of lag will make that evade frame almost impossible to use, practically speaking. And that's going to mean there's a huge amount of players that can't take advantage of a skill like that, and who are impacted by that. On the other hand, so on the idea of should they have specifically OCX servers, and I know you're not asking for them. A lot of people do ask for them. It's kind of an interesting balance that ArenaNet are in, because if they make the OCX servers, yes, that group of the community gets better lag. But if they end up having to go into their own complete different server cluster, such that we now have EU, NA, and OCX, that is splitting the community even further. And in some ways, I think ArenaNet might have dodged a bullet by keeping the OCX players in with the other regions, or specifically NA, which is where I think everyone likes to go. But yeah, and then you've got the idea of the Chinese release as well. Maybe they could have bundled in there. I think if you connected to the Chinese release, wouldn't you have an even better ping than if you connected to NA? I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, the idea of lag in the game is an interesting topic. I don't talk about it too much, so hopefully some little insights there. That's kind of where I sit on it. It sucks, but I do think we're maybe in the best world we could be in? Question mark. ArenaNet just need to think, as they add new features into the game, like gliding, they need to have lag in mind. Because we know for a fact that when gliding came in, they hadn't considered it. The devs were testing out how gliding worked on their own systems, and it felt fine, and it was only far later. You know, they even did a live stream where they explicitly said, hey, yeah, then I tried it with lag, and I realized how crazy it was, so I put in a fix. So, you know, if the devs just have lag in mind as they develop future content, hopefully OCX players will continue to be happy. Hopefully. But don't let me speak on behalf of them, please. So next we've got Eric's84, who says, how often do you change your character's looks? I only have 9 characters. Only 9 characters? And I change maybe one of their outfits a month. So how many outfits do you actually make look really good? And how often do you change it up? Oh, dude, you're asking the wrong person about it. I am awful at fashion. Probably in real life too. Probably a good thing I don't do face cammy things, because especially in Guild Wars 2, I am not good at making decent outfits. Any guild, any friends anyone I've ever got close to in-game will verify this, that generally speaking, I've probably only came up with 1 or 2 good-looking outfits ever. One of them, in my opinion, is the default stuff that I wear, where it's kind of a mix of making Liss, my Elementalist, look good, but also wear a lot of high prestige stuff. So, you know, like Radiant Boots and Wormslayer gloves and get some auras on there and so on. That's like the main outfit. And then the only other thing I think I've ever done very well was when I made like my Sun God outfit, when there was that bug in the game that allowed you to bug out the legendary aura effect, and the incinerator looked completely bonkers. And I did a video where I went into AC and showed this off, and I had like the big Zephyrite yellow helmet, and I had like the Nightmare shoulders and Flame Kiss stuff, and I looked like this big fiery, you know, God, basically. That one specifically, that outfit, that's the only thing that I've ever done, and I've seen multiple people, like, replicate. Even I had a close friend of mine who was like, wow, this looks so cool, I'm gonna start doing it on my Ellie too. Aside from that, I'm pretty awful. All you have to do is look at my Mesmer, look at the fact that I go for joke characters. You know, my Ranger looks like he's stoned all the time. My Norn Warrior is deliberately a giant abominable character that I won't even go into a description of. I did a funny Valentine's Day video on once upon a time. Basically, I'm not good at it. I can only make very extreme effects, and that's why in the BDO stream you recently saw, I also went with something ridiculous, which was like an overly tanned, aging California girl that looks like she's 50 years old, but actually wants to look like she's 20, and gets all tarted up for that. That's what I'm good at, and so I don't change my outfits very much, to answer the question. Fingerlights asks, with so many people asking you about your real-life identity, I've come up with some questions to finally solve the mystery. He says, number 1, how many toes do you have? I have 10 toes. He says, number 2, are you really Scarlett Johansson, as Matt Visual has stated on Visual Wood? I refrain from commenting on that one. And number 3, are you made out of concrete in the shape of ducks or wood in the shape of potatoes? Maybe a little bit of both. He says, okay, seriously, world building videos, question mark. A lot of people watching this, in fact, I'd hazard most people watching this video don't know what the world building videos are. I am quite an enthusiastic world builder, or was last year. I've neglected it very much. Basically, since Heart of Thorns came into my life, I've dropped a few things. But I still have a great passion for it. The idea of building con worlds and populating them with people and making interesting stories, not necessarily for any eventual purpose at the end, but just because it's fun. And I shared that with people on the Patreon Drive. I did an exclusive video where I showed people my technique for working out how a planet would look, like how to build a fantasy world. And specifically the idea is how to build a fantasy world without even being a creative person. See, I don't consider myself a very creative person, but if you know a little bit of science, if you know a little bit about the way that Earth formed its continents and regions and islands and land masses and so on, you can extrapolate that information, and from just some very arbitrary ideas that you put on a piece of paper, you can end up having a really cool looking fantasy world. So I showed people that, and in that video I also said, hey, I might one day go further with this and we'll actually put people in this world, and I'll show you how to uncreatively end up creating this awesome sort of semi-realistic world. And that video has still never happened. Maybe at some point when I've got a little bit of time, but I'm very enthused about too many things at the moment. Too much going on in my life. Next question is from Judith Stewart, who says, hey WP, I hope that the move goes well. I have a bit of a generic question for you. Do you read many books? And if so, do you have any recommendations? It can be fiction or non-fiction, and for any genre. Okay, now we get to counterbalance what I just answered in the previous question, where I sounded, so cultured and smart. I barely read anything. Well, here's the thing. I do think I read a lot, but most of my, and I would say I spend most of every day reading. But the thing is, I'm not reading long-form prose and novels and things that you'd find in a book. I'm reading forums and comments and stuff like that on the internet. It's still reading, guys. It still improves my vocabulary. But yeah, I'm a bit of an uncultured swine, I must be honest. I don't read very much. It never captured me too much. But when it has captured me, I've gone absolutely crazy with it. So like when I was a teen, obviously, a British teenager of the age I was in the perfect bracket, went crazy for Harry Potter. When I find a book series I read on, this is probably the best example because it's a fairly lengthy-ish series, I go kind of crazy with it. I'm a very all-or-nothing man, and most of the reason why I don't read books in my adulthood is because I've accepted this as a flaw in myself, that if I get into a book series, I will shirk all responsibilities to finish reading said book series. And it gets to the point where I read so much and so continually that I do almost nothing else with my life. You know, just basic things like get up, wash, go to the toilet, cook yourself something to eat, things of this nature. Or, you know, if you happen to be employed at the time, go do that. But the rest of my time I just spend reading. It gets so bad that by the time I fall asleep at night, I find my brain narrating my life and my existence as if I was still in a book. So I'd be like, it's the most bizarre thing in the world. But that is how much I will clog my day up because I get so excited about this book and I want to get so much more information out of it. And then when it ends, I get sad. I get like genuinely depressed. Like, oh, I'm never going to see these characters again. And they're gone. And and that was a cool book, and I kind of want to go back, but I've already read it, and then it's just depressing. So these are the things that prevent me from reading, because I'm not mature enough to just, do a chapter a night before I fall asleep. I'm not mature enough for that. I'm the same with pretty much I'm especially bad when it comes to books. I can handle other things, I guess. And, at least with TV shows, I have the advantage of the fact that the universe forbids me to do more than one episode a night, because there are no more episodes out at that time. Something that I'm absolutely faced with, say, with the new Game of Thrones season coming out. But anyway, yes, I don't really read very much. It's the God's honest truth. And maybe you should take it with a pinch of salt whenever you hear me providing story criticisms to real writers and real people who actually understand the written word. Moving on, the next question is from Glorious Tulip, who said, hi WB, first of all, how are you? I'm very good today, thank you. Second, since you've started playing Nightfall on the stream, will you play the bonus mission related to it as well? It might be nostalgia goggles, but I recall these being very good, or perhaps just very fun to play. Yes, I will be doing that. Absolutely, I'll be doing that. The Churai Osa Palawa Joko bonus mission. For those that don't know, these were like extra paid content from GW1, and they were at ArenaNet's height, in my opinion, for understanding the game engine and how to design missions. There were solo missions too. These were really fantastic, and the Palawa Joko Churai Osa one is my second favorite. Dare I say that? Probably my second favorite. I mean, the story of the Sol d'Alessio one is really good, don't get me wrong. And the gameplay of the Tengu one is very, very, very good, which would probably be my first place. But I really do enjoy the Churai Osa one. And I think that it's so integral to the plot of that region of the world. So this is where you get to witness firsthand the day that Churai Osa killed Palawa Joko and imprisoned him in a tomb on this epic 1v1 battle on a bridge that you as a player actually have a very good chance of losing as well if you don't play correctly. So it's a cool mission. And yeah, if we get there, if the streams continue, people like watching them, then I'll keep going. The Nightfall streams, I was getting more views playing Guild Wars 1 recently than I was ever playing Guild Wars 2. That should show you the state that the game was in. Ever since the April patch, though, I now get more views playing Guild Wars 2 on streams than I do Guild Wars 1 again. But a sizable chunk of you guys liked it and continue to like it. So if we get that far, we'll get there and we'll do it. Also, have a question about Dark Souls 3. And I hope that I answered that already in the previous question. I get it. It probably is a game right up my alley with the way it does world building and it tells a story. And even mechanically, that is a very challenging game, but then you can get very good and very precise at it, and it feels very rewarding to play. I understand. It's probably exactly the kind of game I'd love to play. It's just through fate I never did in the end. Perhaps at best, I can assure you guys it's on my radar to play at some point privately and assess. Next question is from Garriden Rouge, sorry, who says, what do you think of the theory that when an Elder Dragon dies, the other Elder Dragons absorb a certain aspect of said dragon? For example, the reason Morgemoth can use corpses to make his minions from is because of absorbing Zaitan's aspect over death after we defeated him. I've been thinking this over for a while, and this was all I could come up with when explaining where magic Zaitan had been gathering went. This could lead to crazy mismatches of dragon minions. I don't believe in this theory. Now, a component of it I do believe. I do believe that Morgemoth had more magic to feast on and probably had a better time of it than some of the other dragons because there was so much latent magic in the environment leaking out from Zaitan. I get that. And I think that, yes, Morgemoth may have experienced some bump up from that. But does that mean that influenced the way that Morgemoth actually works? No. There's kind of two different schools of thought right now. And both of them have some validity, and they kind of tie into some of the more common theories people ask me about at the moment. So one of the other things people ask me about the end of Heart of Thorns all the time is, hey, WP, what do you think is going to happen with that dragon egg? Do you think it's going to be evil because it took Morgemoth's magic? And so your train of thought there is like this question as well, that because the magic came from Morgemoth, it must somehow be tainted and, charged with Morgemothness. So that would mean that the baby dragon, Glint's offspring, now that it's taken some of Morgemoth's magic, it could become evil, or it could have some dominion over plant magic, or whatever. And yes, then there's the idea that now Primordus could do planty things as well as fiery things, or undead things as well as icy things for Jormag. That's like one train of thought. I'm in the other train of thought, though, and this is just that I believe magic is magic, and I think that they demonstrate that way back in GW1 when Cormyr absorbed Abaddon. Did she become evil and corrupt, and did she take 1,000 years of torture and imprisonment into her being as she did that? Not really. She remained Cormyr, and she was clear of mind, and she became the goddess of truth with this magic, rather than the god of secrets, which Abaddon had done with that very same magic, that very same power. And I think this idea of elder dragons exchanging magic and stuff. Magic is magic, and what you choose to do with it is what's important. And I believe the story they're setting up with the baby dragon is the baby dragon is going to use that magic for good reasons rather than bad. And we even see it a little bit as well with the gods between the two games, where Lissa took dominion of water off of Cormyr. So does that mean that Lissa has a bit of Abaddon in her now? No, I just think that, you know, it's just magic in its rawest of form. And that's where the franchise, I think, narratively goes in the most interesting place as well, because then it becomes about character motivations and character usage of their power, rather than just, oh, this person is evil because the magic within him is evil, or this person can do this with magic because this is the kind of magic it is. There's only one kind of magic. There's not planty magic, there's not undead magic, there's not frosty magic, there's magic. Now, to be a contrarian to myself right now as well, there's something else that I'm also a strong believer in that gets completely killed by what I'm saying right now. And this is ore. So from ore, we see that many of the magical artifacts associated with the area kind of had like an undeady tangent to them. So like Sahorthan and Magdair were gifts from ore. The Scepter of Ore. Was the Scepter of Ore crafted in ore? I can't really remember the origins of the Scepter of Ore. But the Scepter of Ore is about controlling the ethereal, and specifically can manipulate the Titans, which are just souls, right? So like there's an undeady angle to that. Vizier Kilbron was a regular man who read a lost scroll that was crafted in ore, presumably, and this forbidden scroll not only caused a giant explosion, but turned him into a lich who is undead and can control other undead. And all those who died in that explosion, the cataclysm, also became shambling undead that went, you know, wandering out in Kryta and so forth. Maybe because of the Vizier, or maybe because just the nature of this explosion. So a lot of the Orion kind of power and magical stuff seemed to be undeady. And there's a suggestion that the reason the men of Ore became so proficient with magic was because they were in a magically charged area, i.e. they were tapping into Zaitan's leaking body beneath them without realizing. And so then that does suggest, actually, because Zaitan was leaking undeady magic around, that they became very proficient at these kinds of artifacts. But none of that's set in stone. That's just, you know, that's just like anecdotal what we've seen. There's probably a lot of magic in Ore that has nothing to do with death. But it's a nice little parallel that I've always liked. And if you're going to say that magic is just magic, you kind of can't also subscribe to this other theory about the way that all works as well. And that explanation as to why Sahorthan and Magdair are, you know, creating ghosts in Ascalon. You can't tie it all the way back to Zaitan anymore, which is something I've always enjoyed doing. So I'm a little on the fence, but I'm more in the camp, as I said already at the start of the question, that magic is magic. And that's it. No cross-crazy dragon minions. Bit of a dated question, unfortunately, because of the spring patch here, but I'll go through it. Binid J says, so, Dragon Stand. I think that there's a general agreement that the zone is somewhat broken, especially for solo casual players. So my question is this: what changes would you like to make to the existing Dragon Stand map, to make it more accessible? Personally, I'd like to see the map in a permanent win state, albeit with plenty of Mordran roamers, and only have the meta begin when the 3 starting camps events are activated. I haven't actually played much Dragon Stand. I can't remember the patch notes too clearly right now since the patch. But didn't they essentially do this? And I think I remember reading a comment of yours on a recent video where you specifically said, yeah, they made Dragon Stand much better, I think, right? So I guess that's what ArenaNet did, right? They moved the pets to be a lot more accessible. You can always buy from the vendor the stuff that you want. Didn't they add a lot more pods? So it's kind of in that permanent win state now. The areas are permanently unlocked. That's like what they did. You were bang on the mark there, and they went with it. And I think that general sentiment is that Dragon Stand is much better right now. We'll see. I'll have to get to that map. So far, I've mostly just played VB and AB since the patch. Karaoke says, during the Reddit AMA after Colin's departure. I really like this question, by the way. Mike Z said something that caught my eye. The goal of our maps, he says, is to create epic moments that bring players together to take on larger-than-life challenges, but give the players the freedom of exploration and reward multiple styles of gameplay. That phrase, create epic moments that bring players together to take on larger-than-life challenges, doesn't seem off the cuff to me. Rather, it seems like an internal goal or motto of ArenaNet in building content. While I'm relatively disappointed in Heart of Thorns, it does seem like they succeeded in this goal. Octavine, Geraint, Mouth of Morgemoth, they all hit that mark. My question, do you think that's an appropriate goal for the game? If not, what is your single sentence description of what Guild Wars 2 should be all about? I love this question. This really, I think you're right. I think that this isn't off the cuff, and I think that this is almost like a mantra. This is something they were really going for. And I think this is a really interesting question because you're right, they did succeed in that aim. I would say that they did. And so it's kind of like ArenaNet went into Heart of Thorns. They had these early meetings. They said, right, where is our PvE game at its strongest? And people come together and they say, well, look, I think I probably have most fun where I'm doing some random events and slowly they like web into one another and then it becomes like this huge, massive boss that I'm suddenly fighting. I've been swept away. And I think that they've identified that with their core release, and they've decided that that's going to be their focus. And that was their focus part, and they did well. And I can't blame them, the devs, for coming to that conclusion either. Can you guys? Because I sort of agree with that. I remember one of my and I'm going to say something here that a lot of people will maybe scoff at because it's not a very well-liked map. I remember one of my favourite moments ever while leveling on my very first character going through Guild Wars 2 was Harathi Hinterlands. All right, now bear with me. I know a lot of people don't like that map, but I had an experience in Harathi where I started at the, is it Seraph's Landing? I started at the Seraph Outpost, where most people go for guild missions in the northwest. And I literally started there, and just by pure chance, I'd never been to the map before, I didn't know anything about the map. I walked to the gates, and I saw a couple of centaurs were, like, attacking. There are these random centaurs that will run and fight the guards. I killed a couple of centaurs, and I thought, oh, these people are, like... And the map was empty when I got here, completely empty. And I thought, oh, the centaurs are trying to push into this town. I didn't know if the town could fall to the centaurs or anything. But an event procced right there and then. It was an escort to take a guy to a camp nearby. And then from that camp, I defended the camp. And then from that camp, I did another escort and another escort and another escort. And ended up finding an event where... There were 3 different... It was like a little Destiny's Edge play. There were... one of each different race went off in different areas, and I helped them all out in their plays. And then I did more... And I literally ended up building more and more players up naturally, doing these events, pushing the whole way through Harathi until eventually I got to Modnir Olgoth at the end. And it was... amazing. It was a very niche, very rare, very specific circumstance for that to happen though. It was really cool. It felt emergent. It felt like I was really battling for territory and control in this map, just like the dynamic event system was supposed to make you feel. And you know, that first time through I didn't see how shallow it was, and I don't think you can have that experience anymore in Guild Wars 2 because of the way that they've timed the world boss events up, but that was a highlight for me. And I wouldn't be surprised if the devs identified a lot of situations like that too in other areas of the game. There are plenty of metas that can give you this experience. There's a reason why Straits of Devastation, in principle, the structure of Straits of Devastation is one of my favorite ideas for a map. My favorite meta event in the entire game, or overall meta event chain, is the Lissa Temple. If Lissa Temple, again, was balanced correctly, I think that could be an incredible cinematic, really well-executed experience. I think Lissa could be amazing. And I think ArenaNet saw that as well, maybe? And they thought this is what we want for our Heart of Thorns maps. So now, in retrospect, we look at it, and what do we think? Well, Heart of Thorns was obviously deficient in a lot of places. Is this, and nailing this idea alone, enough to prop up an expansion? Well, I would say it's not now. I would say no, I think they need a lot more, and I think that the fact that all the Heart of Thorns maps are heavily tied to these large meta events that bring people together like this has actually proved there are a lot of players who need that off time, who need that Queensdale experience, who need that Kessex Hills experience, that Brisbane experience, where they can actually wander around and feel like they're exploring a bit more carefree. Now, I feel like in Heart of Thorns, I got a big mix of that too. I definitely had a lot of moments where I was just relaxedly exploring, but I also felt a little pressure. I remember when I went to the Tangled Depths for the first time, and I was constantly looking at the meta and wondering what was going on and where the Order of Whispers were, if I was, you know, in a lucky map where whatever was happening on the map was actually about to succeed and I was going to miss it. And that added pressure did put a bit more in there. I think if I was ArenaNet going forwards, I would identify 2 things largely for the PvE elements of Heart of Thorns. I would identify that, number 1, they didn't put out enough content. Hopefully they appreciate that. So they need more maps. And number 2, I would have a mix of maps where some are, these very dense, very event-heavy, across the globally event-heavy maps, like Silver Wastes, like Dry Top, like all the new maps, and then also some more classic maps in there as well. That, yes, will have less replayability in the future. They will. But I think that they still offer value, and I think that people will come out feeling happier at the end of the expansion from that. So those are the two kind of big ones. There's obviously a lot of other stuff like the rate that people get masteries and the hero challenge and the difficulty tuning and all that stuff. But just looking at this discussion, I think that's a really cool topic, and I'm curious what everyone else thinks as well. All right, moving on. Oh, we've been spending too long on the questions. Mr. Fluffkins says, one of my biggest problems with the game as is the relation between health, healing, and damage. Because everyone and their grandmother can heal up at least 50% of their health every 30 or so seconds, monsters and players need to kill you in less time than that. That means that most fights will either be a breeze or contain bursts that easily one-shot you. Added to that, each player has a ton of potential damage mitigation, adding further to the need for burst to kill anyone. This leaves little room for less skilled players like me to feel tension building as my HP is decreasing in relation to that of the monster. Instead, what really matters is far more vague and much harder to follow, all of our cooldowns. Basically, I think ArenaNet sort of designed themselves into a corner, severely limiting the possible encounters. So here comes the question, what do you think about this? Is it even a problem? If so, what are the possible solutions? From a base level, I think people will look at what you just said and say, this is really good. This is high twitch. This is high skill. This is high intensity. This is very cool. This is the kind of action combat that I really want. I think there is merit to those arguments. I think that you can confidently say that and there's some real truth to it. But I do think also, yes, that you're right. They did design themselves into a little bit of a corner here. And I think that it's a very hard thing to fix just because of their refusal of splitting balance. There are a lot of big changes I would make and feel very comfortable making to Guild Wars 2 if I knew they only hit PvE. And it's only in PvE that I think this is a big thing. Especially in World vs. World right now where people can stack so much damage mitigation and it's so attritive Zerg v Zerg anyway. But like you look at other MMOs and they'll have stuff like, oh, the tank has hundreds of times more health than the DPS character. That's just never gonna happen in Guild Wars 2 unless PvE existed in a totally different environment. This idea of the self-heal skill, I've always long been an advocate for the self-heal skills having much longer cooldowns and being far less effective unless you spec into healing power. But if you make that change, that affects Conquest in a big way. It affects so much stuff in a really huge way. It takes a lot of testing. And I just don't know whether ArenaNet are ever going to be in the place where they can afford to do that. And more importantly, let me be more specific here. I don't think I would choose to change that as well. I agree with you that I think they've designed themselves into a bit of a corner. And I agree that I actually think there is a more fun version of the game out there where the self-heals, they are more conservative with. Like another core change that's kind of similar I've always wanted for the game is I feel like in general the elite skills could be much higher impact, much more interesting, much more devastating and exciting, but have way longer cooldowns. I personally would be in favor of like a 5-minute, 6-minute, 7-minute cooldown tornado, as long as the tornado absolutely exploded the screen when it went off. But that's very PvE minded. I'm not in favor of that when it comes to World versus World. I'm not in favor of that in even specific areas in PvE either, and that's what makes these things hard. So when I say I don't know whether the ArenaNet have the time to do it, I think it's just because they're so complicated. And specifically, what I mean is I wouldn't choose for ArenaNet to do this, even myself. You know, I'm not saying you're doing this with the question, but it's quite easy sometimes for people to go online and say, oh, why don't they do this? Why don't decorations have a preview function? Why, you know, things like that, of that nature, where the assumption is the only reason it's not changed in the game is because the devs haven't considered it. But I think a lot of the time they have considered it, and it's always a balancing act of do this or this. There is always a priority list. And so if we're looking at this idea of the heal skills with the cooldowns, and I had the choice, hey, do you want to fix this? Would I choose them looking into this idea, this general notion of balance, and the huge rabbit hole that it will lead them down? Do we point ArenaNet in that direction, or do we just have the balance team focus on improving lackluster existing specialization lines and utility skills, and continuing to bump up weak skills and shave down strong skills? And you know, they've already got so much on their plate. As I've said before, I think they have got the hardest jobs right now, trying to keep these completely different areas of the game all in some kind of form of balance. You know, I think I'd have them keep doing that, to be honest, and try and improve some other things rather than the heal skill thing. Essentially, that's my opinion. I think it sucks, and I agree with you. But I think because we've started down this road, it is such a hard road to turn away from. I can't see a situation where ArenaNet do. But I'm curious what you guys think. I think you get very heated opinions on two sides of the fence on that one, so we'll see. Hopefully that's some insight into my position on it, at least. Hey Grandpa19 said WP, 2 real-life questions. Number 1, what is your favorite form of exercise? And number 2, do you believe in ghosts? Have you ever experienced something you could not explain? Ooh, okay. Favorite form of exercise, I'm going to shock everyone here. I'm really going to shock everyone. Running. I've never really liked running. My whole life, I've never really liked running. And I think there are a lot of people out there in the modern Western world that are in this same situation, and you think, oh my god, running, it's just not nice. Running's one of those weird things though, that if you push yourself to do it, running is such a great cure for depression. Running, and when you get used to it, you can see big gains on running. Like I've spent a lot of time lifting weights and, you know, trying to build muscle mass, and comparing like doing a lot of cardio exercise and seeing gains versus just being able to lift a little more and then lift a little more and lift a little more. Definitely when it comes to running, you see gains so quickly. And what originally feels awful, I can very easily see how people get in a position where they love to run and it feels really good to run and it releases all these endorphins and you push your body into that place where it feels awesome. And it's a crazy, really interesting thing to learn about your body. Like when you really start thinking about running and you start running consistently and you try and go for a long time. The thing that really inspired me when it comes, I'm not saying I'm a good runner right now, by the way. I haven't ran for months and months and months and months and months. Make no mistake, I have terrible endurance right now, but I think, you know, if I were to sit down and say, WP, you want to get some more exercise, what are you going to do? I'd probably choose running. Because it just feels so good when you get into the rhythm of it. And it's fascinating because of how much you can hate to run. There's a lot of people out there, you guys might be sitting there right now and thinking, oh, I'm not a runner, I hate running. Running is not a part of my personality, I do not like it. But I promise you, if you gave it the time, if you pushed through the pain, you would find you are a human being and you are built to run. And actually, my moment was when I was watching Life on Earth, I think it was, with David Attenborough, a long time ago. Anyway, there's an episode of that where where David does a piece on an African tribe, I think it is, who still hunt as we expect. You know, most of mankind hunted thousands of years ago, and what they did, they're endurance runners, and they just keep running and chasing their prey and chasing their prey and chasing their prey. And you as a human being, you're not going to outrun a horse in the short term, but in the long term, our bodies are built for it. The way our buttocks work, our bipedal structure, it is all there to mean we can run and run and run and run. And the goat that you're chasing, the antelope you are chasing, will sprint away, get very out of breath, and it will have to rest in the shade. And you just keep coming, and you hit it in the shade, and it has to run off again. And then you hit it there, and it didn't have enough time to rest, and you hit it again, and you hit it again, and you hit it again. And then through the pure endurance of the human body, you defeat your prey. And that is what we're built for, running. And if you give your body a chance to shine at it, you will find it is a very, very fun thing to do. So anyway, there you go. That's my answer to that. And the other thing, do I believe in ghosts? When I was a kid, I used to think I could see ghosts. But looking back on it now, I think I just got the movie The Sixth Sense, which absolutely terrified me a little bit too much into my head. And I definitely do not believe in ghosts. And I haven't for many, 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 many years. Next question is from Tim Syriac, who says, hey WP, some lore I've been wondering about for a long time. Do you think that there might be more than 6 Elder Dragons? We know that there are 6 because the symbols in the Dermot Prior are on the ceiling, but there might even be more Elder Dragons that we do not know. Well, okay, so your point, I'm going to cut in straight away here. Yes, there could be more Elder Dragons, but they would be not considered by the Antikytheria, and they would be not considered by even the ancient races as well. So the chance of there being more Elder Dragons ever since that Dermot Priory patch has been much, 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 much lower. But he says, so like, say, a Jade, Elder Dragon, and Cantha. Second, do you think that ArenaNet might release a core Tyria raid wing in the future, and that we might be able to venture even further into Or and Ara, and further north going into Jormag's lair? Or maybe, how about further northeast into more Flame Legion territory and get a little bit more on the Flame Legion? Third, okay, well, so for your second question, I don't see why there has to be a raid. Yeah, I want to go to the Scavenger's Causeway. Yeah, I want to explore all these fun different places. I don't see why that has to be a raid, though. I think far more likely what's going to happen is we're going to get the third wing of the current raid. Then we're going to get Living World Season 3, right? And in Season 3, they'll probably give us a new map. And once we've got that new map in the game, I think you'll find that the entrance to the second raid is in that map. So you've got a raid update, a Living World update, and then a raid update again, and that raid update takes you into that map. It's likely to do that. We'll see the new raid content come out into the new maps as well, except maybe every now and then where we might see something like, I don't know, the Wizard's Tower, right? Because they did say in an interview before, or there was some quote where they said raids could sometimes just be made up of one wing and dropped in randomly. We might see space for that. But generally speaking, I think they'll be in the new Living World maps. Question 3. that you ask is about Glint's egg and whether it's now considered an elder dragon or not. Well, we went into this discussion a little bit earlier, but I would add to it that no, I don't believe that this makes it automatically an elder dragon. I think to be an elder dragon is to have immense power and strength and purpose. And specifically, the purpose of consuming magic and devouring the world on just like a cyclical schedule. And I don't think that Glint's baby dragon, even though it has absorbed a great amount of magic from Morgemoth's death, is automatically an elder dragon right away. I don't believe that that's true. But, you know, one day it might be in that position. And, you know, it might not want to destroy all of us. And it could still then, as well, actually be considered an elder dragon, which would be very nice. And the final question, now that the new legendary weapons are pretty much gone for good, does this mean the same will happen for legendary armor? Once legendary armor is done, we'll be getting the whole set or just a piece of it? Well, they explicitly told us that legendary armor and backs would continue. Does that just mean the current set of legendary armor? I suppose I can't remember the exact quote. Maybe you can be an absolute pessimist and say, yeah, they're only doing the one set of legendary armor. But I doubt it. I think that we'll keep getting more legendary armor with new raid wings or new raids in general, because otherwise you're going to have this weird position where the first raid, you know, like take it 3 years in the future. There's now 4 raids in Guild Wars 2. Each with all multi-winged structures and so on. There's now 4 raids, and as it so happens, only the first one gives you legendary armor. That's going to be a bit weird. I think we'll get legendary armor from all of them. And people will continue to want that, by the way, because they'll have, even if they have other sets of legendary armor, because they'll look different and because they can put runes on them. You know, you can have a healing runed set of legendary armor that you swap between all the healing sets, and then an offensive one and a defensive one, and so on and so on and so on. Next question is from Sierra Blue, who said, hey WP, I have a question that haunts my brain every time I visit Lion's Arch. In the Lion's Arch loading screen at the bottom of the page, about a third of the way on the left, it looks unmistakably like a man at the opening of a fence with a blue shirt and sunglasses. I wonder about it every time I see it. I've even asked non-Guild Wars 2 playing friends if they see anything. Without any prompting, they see it too. Who is this guy? Do you think it's an Easter egg of some sorts? Thanks. I wish Sierra Blue that I could tell you this was an Easter egg. But I don't think it is. And the reason I don't think it is because, yes, when this Lion's Arch loading screen first got dropped into the game, there was a Reddit thread where someone had pointed out the lion they were using was actually just a picture of a real-life structure of a lion, somewhere in Russia or something, or like Eastern Europe, I think. And the devs had essentially just cropped it in and, you know, put some nice filters on it and stuff, and they were passing it off as like the Lion's Arch lion, when really it was a real world lion. So what you're looking at with this loading screen is like a collage of real life stuff. And so that dude, that man, that is an oversight. That is a man in like a blue polo shirt that is, yes, incredibly, wonderfully, horrendously immersion breaking on the main loading screen everyone sees in all of Guild Wars 2. I hate that man. I think that loading screen is the dog's ass. And I think, honestly, they should get rid of it and maybe replace it with some of that other beautiful concept art we saw, say, on the blog post for the Lion's Arch overhaul a while ago. Sorry to whoever did it. I mean, I'm sure you're a very talented artist, but that man really winds me up. And now that I've seen it, now that it's been pointed out to me, as it was several months ago, it's one of those things you cannot unsee, and it always just drags me down just that little bit every time I go to Lion's Arch, which is several times a day if I'm playing Guild Wars 2. Zachary said, hey WP, besides small comments on Twitter from, say, Bobby Stein or similar things, has anyone from ArenaNet ever reached out about something you said in a video? On occasion, never anything crazy. I mean, you're saying besides small comments on Twitter. Sometimes I've had a devs reach out to me when it's not been on Twitter. The most recent example would be my Zurich Let's Play. Turns out a couple of guys who work at ArenaNet were devs for Zurich. And so they'd watched, I guess, at least part or maybe the entire Let's Play I did, and then they left some comments on YouTube, and we were talking about that. And, you know, I've interacted with the devs a little, never about anything serious, never about anything unprofessional, never about anything, you know, that would be crazy gossip that you guys would get involved in. Probably the same level of conversation you could have with one of the devs if you went to one of their Twitters or various social media sites and just said hi to them like that. The guy in charge of the banning and security for the game, Chris Cleary, he was in my guild for a long time when I was in ATT, the world boss, the Triple Trouble guild, and the guild that actually does some raid testing. And so he's probably the dev I've talked to more than any, but it's not too much, not a crazy amount. Moving on, you got Wonderland. who says, do you think your video view counts are reflective of the health of the game or certain parts of it? Can you use new content spikes to get an idea of how long the player base, who are also viewers of your videos, accepts droughts before there is a serious drop in population? And finally, how much, if any, does the change in cadence over time from bi-weekly down to whereverly affect your bottom line? Yes, absolutely. I do think that the views I get are representative of how well Guild Wars 2 is doing. Absolutely. And based on that, yeah, I do think that if I was a very discerning man, I could figure out, you know, which patches are the ones everybody really likes and which patches are the ones that they're kind of lukewarm about. This was a discussion we had a while ago, and as far as I recall, people didn't quite believe what I was saying at the time, and I was trying to explain to people what I meant. Basically, I was saying, yes, if the game is doing well, people like to watch my videos and my viewership goes up. If the game is doing poorly, people don't. And there were a sizable group of people making the counter response that no, actually, people watch me more when they're not playing the game, because I'm like their one connection to the game now. And I don't doubt that there are people out there who do that. But that does not mean that as Guild Wars 2 becomes less popular, my popularity goes up. It doesn't work that way. And a great example is just the recent... It's never worked that way. And a great example is just the recent months where, you know, the Legendary news came out and Living World had not released and Heart of Thorns was a little bit lackluster and, you know, World vs. World was completely dead, where the game was shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. It wasn't doing very well. And of course, my views reflected that. My views continue to reflect that, as opposed to just before an expansion comes out where everyone's all hyped and excited and interested in the game and playing it as well to get ready for Heart of Thorns, where, you know, the viewership goes up. So the general understanding and atmosphere of Guild Wars 2 affect me on a huge level. I saw a big viewership rise, especially on Twitch. Twitch gets affected by this massively. My views on Twitch doubled after the spring patch. And I pointed out in the stream, I said, guys, is this because of the patch? How many of you put a 1 in chat if you're watching me because of the patch? And just, you know, chat got flooded with all these 1s where people were obviously doing that. So it's actually a very close tie, I would say. I remember with Season 1 and Season 2, even though I had a fair amount of videos to make about, there was no increase in viewership at all. And what that tells me is that through Season 1 and Season 2, there was no growth for Guild Wars 2 as an MMO. The idea of Season 1 and 2 is that these frequent updates would be high quality, people would keep playing the game, people would tell their friends about the game, more people would come in, and Guild Wars 2 would continue to remain relevant. And hey, you know, the patches could get onto general gaming media sites as well, and there's that constant advertisement going out, and this is like a snowball that keeps growing and growing and growing, and the game gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a nice idea, but ArenaNet tried Living World for oh so long, and that snowball never grew. I have a feeling that if Guild Wars 2 in general got bigger, I also would have generally got bigger, and you would have seen other YouTubers getting bigger. It's very hard for that to happen, and it certainly didn't. You know, a lot of people think that Heart of Thorns only happened because ArenaNet listened to all the players who were complaining about the lack of an expansion. ArenaNet, you shouldn't do Living World, you should do the expansion model, blah, 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 blah. And now, you know, we've got a lot of people in our community who say, oh, expansions were a terrible idea, and no one should have convinced ArenaNet they were a good idea. I don't think the main reason we got Heart of Thorns is because the player base was asking it. As much as I think ArenaNet do enact changes because the player base asks for them, I think we got an expansion because the Living World structure did not grow Guild Wars 2. And the reason why I say it didn't grow Guild Wars 2 is because on my end, I never saw any growth either. And that may sound very big-headed to say, like, oh, if Guild Wars 2 is getting bigger, I absolutely have to. It's not just me, it was everyone in the community. Nobody was gaining ground, and in the end, they moved to something else. And they've only done 1 expansion so far, so we'll see how it goes, like multiple expansions down the road. But that's been my general understanding of 4 years having covered this game. Could be wrong. Next question is from Stephen Pieffa, who said, I never know how to say your name, dude. I'm so sorry. He says, hey, WP, I know it would probably never happen, but what do you think about ArenaNet doing single-player standalone games in the universe? Also, what do you think they will ever do more books, etc.? It's funny you ask this. I wanted to do like an interview with the devs. This was a while ago. It was an interview I wanted to do with Colin Johansson. And one of the questions I had pegged that I wanted to ask him was, where do you see Guild Wars in 10 years? Or where do you see ArenaNet in 10 years? And this kind of ties into the previous question in some interesting ways, because it's like, all right, you are a company that ties yourself to a single game. If that single game flops, you flop with it. I mean, do you have a contingency plan that if Guild Wars 2, nothing you ever do, you know, 4 expansions down the road, you're still not getting the snowball and you're still not growing, Are you content to just continue making updates for this game forever? Do you have like a plan in place where there's like a line, and if you drop below the line, you're going to try something else? If ArenaNet decides to try something else, is it going to be a totally different genre? I would like to see they keep the IP, but go into a different genre of gaming, like single-player gaming. I think that would be really cool. And generally speaking, I think ArenaNet have done their single-player content, where you could be a lot more narrow in your focus. I think they tend to have done very well. Is it ever going to be on the table for ArenaNet to simultaneously develop GW2 and another game that would be more narrow in scope, like a single-player game? Considering the fact that they can't even maintain Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 and have showed no indication they care for it, I guess that they're not that interested. I think it all ties back to some of their original ideas before GW2 came out. I've mentioned this on some videos recently. If you ask yourself this, what did ArenaNet want to make when it came to Guild Wars? What did they desperately want above all else with their MMO? They were always telling us before Guild Wars 2 came out, they wanted to make the best MMO out there. They don't really say that so much anymore, but I think that if that's your goal, to fixate on them before launch, if your goal is to make the best MMO, you don't split yourself several ways. You don't split yourself to maintain this game and this game and this game and this game. You are a company solely devoted to your baby, the best MMO, and they know they need their entire focus on that MMO to be the best MMO. I wonder if now, if their opinion about that has changed slightly, or if it ever will. I think it's a really cool question, but it's also a big question to go into to randomly ask a dev, right? Where are you going to be in 10 years? Do you have any ideas? And, you know, just expect this huge list of other games they're going to make to come out. It's probably a bit unrealistic. I've said many times as well, sort of related, I don't think we'll ever see a Guild Wars 3. Not another MMO and not a Guild Wars 3. I don't think. Next question is from Jared Campbell. Second to last, this one. Hey WP, hope you're doing well. About a year ago, I've become a huge fan of your and Matt's content. Clearly, a lot of thought and effort goes into each video, and this makes me wonder, not to be rude, but why don't you have a larger audience? So my question for you is, what short and long-term goals do you have for the channel, and what projects do you have in mind to reach those goals? This is a bad question to ask me, but I promised I'd answer them all, so I'll answer it, all right? This is a bad question because I'm going to depress people with the amount of things I want to do, all right? I actually have a list. With the way I work, I have a list on my PC of everything I guaranteed want myself to do and accomplish on that day. So like for today, my list today is to record this video with you guys, to make sure I stream, to make sure I publish a different Guild Wars 2 video that's going to be going up today, which is the video you guys saw yesterday, and you know, several things along those lines, and then other like real life related stuff. So I have a file with a list of everything I want to accomplish on the day, but also I have below that a list of all the things I'd like to accomplish over like the month or so, like, or over a longer term. All right. And so these are the projects I would like to be doing. I would like to be rolling out. If I could have everything on this list all at once, I'd be a very happy man. So as you guys know, I do actually run 3 channels at once right now, all right? So number 1 is I want to have a Guild Wars 2 video every day. Number 2, I want to have 4 stream videos go up on Wood and Potatoes 2 a week, plus maybe little extra bonuses. In fact, at the end of all the videos you guys are seeing, there's a question mark box on the end slate, and you can click said question mark box to go to a random video on my channel. I've always wanted as well to produce a series of like mini 10 to 15 second long videos that are special little things that sometimes clicking that question mark takes you to, so people can always have that chance, that roulette chance of finding something fun. In fact, I had an accidental link on yesterday's video, the raid lore video. I had an accidental link on there to a private unlisted video I had sent to another person in the community about like a completely different project. And there was a random comment on there yesterday where someone said, am I the only person who clicked the question mark? And I was like, oh god, no, I've accidentally linked to this. So that's another project I'd like to have all of those set up, and I'd like to have those going. There's also other vague things about the art that I'm doing for the channel and stuff, but we won't talk about those. Here's the project. Here is what I'd like. All of these, all right? Daily Guild Wars 2 video. 4 stream videos going out. An alternate Let's Play video going out. Tomb Raider is currently my #1 focus, but I'd love to do FF15 when it comes out, and I'd also love to do Final Fantasy 12. In fact, if I could have all that going on at once, that would be pretty amazing. I would like a daily video going up on Concrete Ducks as well. Over on Concrete Ducks, I'd like to do audio, completely non-gaming related stuff, like audio readings or fun posts that I find online, or interesting stories and short stories and just interesting facts and factoids, and that would be really, really cool. I really want to set that up. I want to have a daily visual wood video going up. That one we're getting good, so that also I want to be going up across all those 3 channels. I'd like to be happening. We also mentioned on the Patreon drive, the first of a world building video. I'd like to finish the world building series. I'd also forced the Google Drive as well, probably not one of the channels. I'm very proud of the way that I work these days and the amount of automation that I've set up and the amount of systems and best practices that I've learned. And I would like to make a video series of basically how to YouTube, how to make videos, how I do this, how I do that, because I have a lot of very specific systems and setups that I have built myself through my own little scripts, and I've built myself through 5 years, actually almost 6 years worth of being on this website that I think is all really fascinating. And I would like not just to share with other people how I do those things because I'm proud of it, but also it'd be nice to have it all down and like documented, so in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, I can go back and see what I was like in what I would consider my height of production. Or maybe not my height of production, but, consider the early days compared to the later days or whatever. So I'd like to do that as well. And last of all, and my biggest focus lately, the thing that depresses me the most I haven't been doing lately, is virtual reality stuff. My God, I love my Oculus Rift. I've been playing so much of it. Well, except the last week or so because my PC keeps randomly shutting down, but that's a different story. And I really want to start giving you guys more videos about it, but I have to figure out like the best format to do it. I want to show you guys what Black Desert Online is like in VR, maybe do a bit of branching out there. But it's like, where's the space? Where's the space in my week to start doing the VR stuff? Where's the space on the channel to start doing it? One of the most fun things about my life at the moment is figuring out how to manage my time to accomplish all these many, many things that are constantly bubbling around in my head. So those are my goals. Those are the projects. Those are the things I'd like to be doing, which is basically exactly what you asked. And the other part of your question was, why don't we have a bigger audience, me and Matt? I think Matt's just been very unlucky. I think Matt has landed on a good format now. I think he puts out a high quality review once a week, and slowly he will build an audience off of that. And if he covers the right game, and like catches fire with the right game at the right time, he will be recognized for the quality of his content and he will have a bigger audience. But so much of YouTube is luck that he's, there is no guarantee it will happen, and it's a very depressing conversation to have, basically. But hopefully one day he does catch fire, and he deserves to. And as for me, well, my main focus has always been Guild Wars 2, and it's just like I mentioned in the previous content, I am in many, many, many ways tied to it. There's obviously only going to be a small percentage of the game's population who come to YouTube to watch videos about it, so you're going to hit an upper limit at some point. And maybe I'm there. I'm sure I could improve, don't get me wrong. In fact, quite fascinated to find a while ago, several months ago now, I was linked by my contact at NCSoft, David Ortiz. I was linked some Spanish channels that have been covering Guild Wars 2 and getting like tens of thousands and thousands and thousands of views of just like their first ever run through Ascalon catacombs and stuff. It's bizarre. It blew my mind. But generally speaking, you don't find it gets too much bigger than this. I remember shortly after Guild Wars 2 came out, there was a channel a bit larger than mine. That was Dontain's channel, but then he kind of stopped making content. Most people don't. They're not in it for the long haul. I can improve, I can do better, but I cover Guild Wars 2 not to be a big YouTuber. That was never at the forefront of my mind. I cover Guild Wars 2 because I'm a fan of Guild Wars 2, and if there was something else on my mind, I would have dropped it already, and I would have been bandwagoning from big game to big game to big game a lot longer ago. And yeah, hopefully that answers your question. It's a tricky topic. I don't know. It feels like it's so easy to sound stupidly big-headed. I generally speaking don't like talking about this kind of stuff. If you want to hear me ramble more about this, probably catching one of the streams at some point is a good idea. Anyway, on to the final question. Last but not least, for this Super Q&A is from Rufus, who says, "Hey WP, in your Final Fantasy X series, you talk quite a lot about what you'd want in X3, even though it's unlikely to happen. Who would you like to be the main character for that game? For example, Tidus, Yuna, or maybe Riku, or someone completely different?" Well, X2 kind of seemed to set up that Riku would be like the main character of the next one, because she didn't seem to have much to do in the previous game. The audio drama introduced some interesting characters, but to be honest, But looking back at it, it's only been a few weeks since we finished X2. Even looking back at it, I'm not actually that thrilled about the idea of an X3. And especially the idea of what they did with Sin and the idea of beckoning and all that stuff. I'm not sure I'm that excited about it. My main excitement, if they were ever to expand that universe, and I know what I'm about to suggest is what everyone suggests, and it's a boring idea, and they themselves said that they were bored by the idea, which is why they didn't do it with X2 in the first place. But I would want to see the prequel story with Jecht, Auron, and Braska. And I still frequently find myself thinking of like a total modification version of X2 where you get a different story and different characters but the same gameplay mechanics. Because mechanically, I think X2 is such a strong game. It's got such a good item system, such well-defined abilities, such really cool classes, and a great idea for the way that different classes would work and swapping them in the battles if animation times and things were slightly different. I think it's got a really great idea. And there's so many different garment grids. If it had, and I mentioned this so many times in that series, if you had a long cohesive narrative and combined it with all the really decent game systems and mechanics that are in X2, you could have a fantastic game. And I think that's what I would want. I would want a prequel game based on the X2 game engine. That would be amazing. But there you go, guys. That's the Super Q&A for today. If this sparked your mind in any way on any of these many wild and varied topics, feel free to pick me up on it and we'll have a bit of a talk about it. But until next time, guys, have a great evening. As always, if you do fancy supporting on Patreon, it would be incredible and mean the world to me. It is what keeps me afloat. It is what is allowing me to move out and live a real life for the first time in like 3 years, which is going to be totally badass. But thank you, guys. It means the world that you're here, at least listening to the video. And until next time, thanks for watching. An idiot, and I made promises on a stream, and I shouldn't have. So a couple of months ago, those of you who watch will know what I'm about to do here. A couple of months ago, while we were streaming, whatever we were doing in game, the door went, so I ran off to collect my mail, and as it turns out, I'd gotten a parcel, something that I was very, very excited about, and it was a very rare thing, something I had to import